Hello, everybody. It's episode 21, and we are talking about a pretty edgy topic today. Anne and I have we've had all these moments together recently where we've had these like collisions of inspiration around ideas. And one of the things I know Anne loves to do is she loves the intersection of different disciplines and different ideas. And so today we're talking about the intersection of AI and embodiment. And we're going to share with you why we're talking about that, and how that came to be a part of our recent conversation, and what we feel like the role of embodiment is as we move quickly, right? Marching speedily toward the use of AI and more of the aspects of our life building and our business building. But first, our beloved What's in Process, What's in Progress. I haven't really had a moment to think about it. Do you have something off the top of your head? Yeah,
I
do
will
it.
go off the top of my head because I
Okay.
totally have something to share today.
Okay, I can't wait.
I am forever very grateful that I have stepped away from a brick and mortar business ownership. Um, I didn't even realize the the how it was affecting me until it was no longer there,
Mm.
in that embodied way. And I'm just really enjoying myself. And in celebration
That's so obvious.
of some of that enjoyment is my family will be traveling abroad for the first time since the pandemic, and I bought the tickets a couple like an hour ago, so
Nice.
all is set. I'll communicate that with you, Chantel, on the dates exactly. But
Yeah,
I'm
so
just
great.
so excited to do that, and so thankful that I have the opportunity to. So
Yeah, awesome. So great. I think one thing I'm feeling kind of mm, compelled by is this new endeavor that we have, which is to bridge embodiment with brain-based learning and coaching. And
mm,
so Anne and I are in this intensive process of learning a whole new skill set in a way around brain-based coaching and leadership through the Neuro Leadership Institute, yay, NLI. And we've completed phase one, and it's been really interesting. It's beautiful, actually, of course, in hindsight, to feel like you have put yourself in a position to really be pushed and to recognize the expression in yourself of being pushed into zones of not knowing, not being an expert, um, not really understanding or not having your expectations met, and having to shift expectations, and just really digging deep, which is great. And it's been personally very satisfying, but also immediately so impactful for us in our business, in the way that we are engaging and supporting our entrepreneurs, our leaders, and our educators. So I love that. I really love that we've stepped into that. And I think you all who are listening and have been listening will notice the shift in our conversation and how we talk about things, because it's going to make, I think, maybe a um, subtle but significant. Can those two things exist at the same
oh
time?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
So really impacting the nuance of the way that we engage with our work and our lives, really. So that's what I'm feeling pretty excited about these days.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it's really fun because I think most of you know Chantel and I work together, and um, a lot of what we learned, portion of what we learned is how in which to ask questions and how in which to support people and in insight development. And it's just so fun to see us each already positioning questions and supporting people in that way. And it just makes me realize how all along we've have been um, even in the world of like Pilates, you're frequently just, trying to support people in developing insights.
Yeah.
And if
Yeah.
they can have a felt insight, you're like, oh my gosh, it's, it's so strong. So I
Yeah,
really
yeah.
love it.
It's definitely influenced, I think, our work and the way we're positioning the work that we've created already and giving us inspiration as to what we want to create moving forward. And I think it's given us also this beautiful depth and consistency in the language that we're using about our work. So, of course, you and I always are like one of our big objectives with everybody that we work with is clarity, and how do we come to clarity. And I think you and I through this process are just becoming more and more clear, and that's really exciting, to be in that and to share that. And speaking of which, that is actually one of the moments where we started talking about this idea of the intersection of AI and embodiment was at our January retreat. Some of you know that we take monthly, if possible, trips to Napa to hang out with each other and connect and share space, and do a lot of ideation and a lot of business building. And so we were there early January. We were sitting at one of our favorite places that we make our way to by the kind of the end of the day, the Andaz in Napa as a hotel, beautiful lounge area. And we're sitting in this, this is cocktail time. So, we've worked all day and we're winding down and we're
Yeah.
debriefing. And it's kind of the moment where we let our minds expand and we just kind of go for flow and creativity, which I love. So we're sitting in this big leather couch and we have our cocktails and we're talking about changing our business name. And we had been prompted by our mentor and coach to consider where our business would be in 10 years and what kind of impact we thought we would be making in the world in 10 years. And Anne, being the brilliant scholar that she is, pulls out, I don't remember exactly what you said, but something to the effect of like, well, in 10 years, AI is going to be it's going to be in everything. It is going to be a part of the way that we function in the world. And so if we are an embodied based business, right, driven by sharing embodiment and how to tap embodiment and leverage embodiment and all of what that means, what is the intersection between embodiment and AI? And so we started going down this beautiful, fun rabbit hole of talking about that. And so we wanted to share that conversation with you because if you are a creator of any kind, business builder or a leader, you have, whether you're a copywriter or you are, an advocate of some kind, like if you are putting work in the world, you're probably coming up against AI. I mean, even if you have a freaking smartphone and a computer, right? You probably are coming up against AI, um, uh, in a way that you're aware of, right? Because I think it's living below the surface in so many ways that we're not aware. But Anna's gonna take us down this path today to talk about a specific aspect of AI that's really prevalent, and how embodiment, what's the potential of embodiment to maintain the humanness of the result of the AI. And then we'll see where that goes. I think we could probably take it in a lot of different directions, but
Well, thank you so much for laying that out there, Chantel. I love that. So why I'm motivated to speak on this is because there was a time in the past where there was another new technology and I wasn't able to speak out about it. And and I think like it's important that people who are in the embodied arts have their voices be heard. One of the things we know is when you have an overlap of ideas, you can have new ideas come to play, and it's important that our voices be heard and that we're not just always um, just on the receiving end of technology. Why cannot, of course we can be at the forefront, right? And so that's why I want to speak out on this concept, even though I'm not an AI developer by any means. But what I do want to share is years ago, in the age of the brain, there was a time when they were really just starting to put deep brain implants into the brain to really support people with Parkinson's, to support people who were stuck in their bodies and could not move. And then maybe they wanted to move like a robotic hand. And this was with brain implants. And I remember I was listening to Science Friday, which is a show that I listen to occasionally. It's on NPR out here in the West Coast. And they were really taught, and the opportunity was you could speak to the person who was developing this technology. And I was on the phone and I was ready. I'd like called in, I had my kids, I'd somehow managed to like, they were quiet and I was ready to talk. And they're like, oh, and we ran out of time. And I was like,
Oh.
so bummed. I was like, oh, I have all these questions for you. Have you thought of this? And what I wanted them to think about was this connection of, and in like, you're working with researchers who are very, very good at developing, the technology of the brain and allowing, some sort of electronic device to read brain signals. But how can we draw more attention to those brain signals, or how can we create movement that is in support of the technology? And I know that with the attention and intention that you give movement, when you are being really thoughtful about it, like in an example of Pilates, when you are so in tune, that in my mind, that probably would have really helped those developers of that work, where rather than get someone who maybe is really skilled at the design of the piece, but not with body movement, because I feel like it's like, well, we'll just get the body to move and it doesn't really matter, right? As long as it's moving.
Yeah.
It's
See your
almost like you
point.
just kind of get like swept under the rug. And I'm like, no, there's very different ways in which to teach movement. People in the movement arts are really smart. They know what they're doing. And so let's bring these together. So now that AI is out there, and it's definitely in the headlines right now, and we never know what's going to happen with technology. Like sometimes it goes somewhere and sometimes it's a fizzle, but it seems like AI is really here to stay, and is something that's going to be really big. I want to take a stand and share that people who study embodiment, who know how to get someone not just to move but to feel, that ability to bring feeling out, to bring sensation out, and awareness of feeling is just so huge and so important within our within AI. And I just don't want us to be left on the just kind of be left there again. It's like, no, we can really bring a lot to that. And so I've been reading articles mainly in pop culture, but I've been reading, there was one article I wanted to reference today that will be in the resource notes for our for the podcast, by David Brooks from the New York Times, where he writes, in the age of AI, major in being human. So he's essentially arguing like, study or, get a major in a university or something like that, in something that has a sense of being human. And he gives multiple options. He talks about a distinct personal voice, presentation skills, being talented or having creativity, unusual worldviews, and empathy. But as I was looking at this, I still feel like there's a lot that's one big piece that's missing, is this piece of sensing our awareness, or having awareness of your embodied feelings. And you can grow that awareness through the context of Pilates. You can grow that awareness through the context of nervous system work. You can grow that awareness through the concept of mindfulness. And every single one of those has a little different flavor because you are understanding awareness of yourself and your felt sense in a different way. And so I felt like, oh, well, wouldn't that be interesting if there was more attention paid to, the more you're better able to articulate your embodied feelings, I believe that would probably have a better support for an output within AI. So to be very specific, like from my understanding of where we're at right now in AI, is that you have to put in a prompt. So you yourself are putting in a prompt to either a text generator or a visual generator. And so you might want the prompt to be like, hey, find all the research about, um, fascia within the last 10 years based on the work of Tom Myers and excluding, maybe there's somebody you want to exclude, or maybe there's someone that you want to weave in, like some other, like the work of Elizabeth Larkham and how that worked. And then it would create, and you'd say in 5 paragraphs. And so it would then create this document for you. And then the idea right now is that, in February of 2023 is that you go in, most likely make some edits, make sure that it's accurate, and then you essentially post this blog, this article. So it's essentially kind of, in my mind, it's like, oh, you can design a draft. And so that would really impact educators, right?
Mm.
And if you are a creative and you are an educator, being able to leverage AI in a way that allows you to maybe more quickly design your education could be supportive. But then the other piece that I was reading that I also thought was interesting was within the Atlantic, and it was called "The Most Important Job School of the Century" by Charlie Warzel, and he speaks to this point that it's quite interesting. It's all like right now we're in this point where it's all about essentially what you're putting in. They're called prompt generators. So you're trying to put in some sort of a prompt. And so what I'd love to see and what I'd love to discover, and so we're thinking of doing a follow-up podcast on this, but how does it change? How do the prompt outputs change when you are able to be more descriptive with your emotionality or with your sense of feeling or your sense of embodiment? And from what I've read in the Warsaw article, it depends on, there's different types of AI creators. So depending on which one you're using, they all have like a different flavor,
Sure.
which, makes sense. But this makes me think how if we're trying to, if you're in a world in 10 years from now and everything seems to be created by AI, whether it's the article you're reading or some post you're seeing on social media or the TV you're watching or the reel or whatever you're seeing.
Or the piece of art you're looking at.
Yes, thank you.
Or the music that you're listening to.
Thank you. Yeah. Like
Yeah.
how will there be an existential sense of loss? Will people feel that there's a loss of embodiment somehow?
I want to just pause. Can I stop you for 1 second? Because I love this language of existential loss is so powerful, because I think most of us will not notice until it's the accumulation of the loss is making it difficult for us to get out of bed, as an example. And I think about this in relationship to COVID and the nervous system, and what none of us knew what was happening to us over the days and weeks and months of sheltering in place, because this lack of one larger understanding of safety, and then our lack of ability, not for the blame of ourselves, but the world that we live in, to identify our embodied experiences, and then to even have the language to express that. We thought, there was always this caveat of like, not for everybody, but for people who were in their own homes, sheltering in place, in a safe place where there wasn't already dis-ease or dysfunction or even violence. So for me, for example, or for you, for example, we think, well, I'm in the confines of a home that I created, and that's a safe space, but we are isolated. And so in fact, over time, that isolation from the rest of the world, the forcing of being only to be in one place, chips away at our sense of safety, and we actually end up not feeling safe, and we don't even realize it. And I would theorize or postulate that that's exactly what will happen with AI, is that we will not notice the existential loss until it hits us over the head one day and we don't know why we're depressed, and we don't know why we can't get out of bed, and we don't know why we've lost motivation, or we don't know why we're always manic, or we don't know why we're always angry. That is, I think that is the fallout. And we won't notice it because it will be so insidiously slow and consistent. Not to be like all nihilistic about the whole thing, but I think, but I really like, wow, that just hit me when you said that, because I think
Mm.
we have to be proactive. We have to be preventative. We have to educate ourselves and share this information with other people so that they can become aware of the critical nature of humanness and human connection, because there is no turning away from AI unless you're going to go off the grid and live in, the woods and not engage with the digital age, which most of us are not going to do. So we have to armor ourselves with this understanding. And I would say, again, now I'm on the soapbox, is that we need to like deliberately engage in becoming more embodied
I mean,
on
I'm on the
purpose,
same, yes. And that's why I
and
think,
teach that to our children and infuse it into our businesses and make sure that that is one of our primary values and jobs, because the world we are entering into is going to be one that eventually will be unrecognizable unless we like, we've got to take up this banner to be more embodied. I mean, it's just astounding already how, I was just love that. I don't know what the exact quote is, but from, I think it's The Dubliners by James Joyce. I think I've got that right, where he's talking about the main character who walks around, the heck is the character's name, with his head completely separated from his body.
mm,
That was written decades ago. And the relevance to the way that we live our lives now, right, is that this value of our intelligence, our intellect, our thinking, as something that is really the only value in our body, is something we take to the gym.
yeah.
Maybe.
Oh, yeah. I love that. I love that. Or, but no, I take it to my Pilates studio, or
Yeah.
I take it to my yoga class. Like, that's still not enough. Like, what we're advocating for is that the embodiment is a practice that is with you, that is always with you. And at
Yeah.
some points you can really dive into it, and then other times you cut it off and you're all in your head, but don't never return to it.
Yeah. Well, it just is you. Like none
Mm.
of this dualistic, like understanding of who we are and how we experience the world. It makes me think of Dr. Gabor Mate, and he talks about us, and this from your pain science work, but we are biopsychosocial spiritual, period. We are all the things in one big jumbled pot. We are not separate. So it's also a paradigm shift, right? Of like, I'm not going to dance between my embodied self and my thinking self. They're not different.
Mhm.
Like they are actually, in fact, not different, because you cannot have a thought without your body experiencing something, and your body cannot experience something without you having a thought or having an emotional expression. They are just interwoven, and they're happening almost simultaneously. I didn't know I was going to get so
But I mean,
excited.
it's a passionate thing, right? And I
Yes.
feel like I am definitely passionate about this topic, and I feel for those of us who are practicing or are curious, whether we're receivers or givers of embodiment practices, that um, you know, as technology increases, and it sometimes it's unclear, well, is that reality, or is that a figment of, or is that a bot, or is that just
Mm,
AI put together.
yeah.
um how can we feel that there's that? It just feels like you have to put a stake in the sand and say, this is what an embodied experience is. And like you
Yeah.
said, it's not either or,
Yeah.
it's both. And so we would love to hear from others of you who have thought about this. And we'd love to probably get some technologists on Love
Oh
to
my
speak
gosh.
to someone who designs this work to see if we're on par, but um, I'd be really curious to speak with someone who works in this vicinity and is thinking about this, because um, it's not just people, I think, who are designing the work thinking about it, but a lot of society. And we want to, I think all of us can be at the table with ideas and support, so that the AI that we do create and that we do use on the daily isn't going to be an insidious beast. But
Yeah, well, that
one that is,
it
yeah,
doesn't separate us from our humanness, but can it enhance our humanness? That's, I think, an interesting question. I wanted to circle back to your thought about, how we enter a prompt. Does it make a difference whether or not it has a nuance of emotional tone, which is an expression of embodiment, right? We use expressive language and emotional language to say how we're feeling. And so I'm curious about that, but it begs another question, which is, do we individually have the language even? And you kind of touched on that when you were talking about it, but it is actually, I think, a bigger issue. There's that great book called Emotional Intelligence. I can't remember who the author. Do you remember the author's name of that book?
I don't off the top of my head. It easily Googleable,
Um,
easily
yeah,
searchable, but
Daniel Goleman,
that was a Daniel
emotional.
Goldman.
Yeah, Daniel Goleman. Um, but I'm thinking, like, it's not just emotional intelligence. What if we position it as embodied intelligence, right? Like, what is your level of embodied intelligence, which in my mind informs emotional intelligence? And then that's what helps to give us um, better access to the language. It- because that's a big piece. I mean, you can feel all the feels, as they say, but if you don't have the language to express what you're feeling, then it's almost like, you're in the water with a little life raft, but the island is over there. Like, you can't get to the island if you don't have the language.
Absolutely. I mean, what we know from research around emotion and around is that you've got to be able to label it. It's in the
Yeah.
labeling that you develop that ability to essentially separate yourself from the emotion, not in a bad way, but it's more like, and not in a, I don't even know if separation is the right view. It's that you give yourself more perspective or distance from the emotion, so that you're
Yeah.
able maybe to see the emotion in its entirety versus just this hot feeling you're feeling, or this cold feeling you're feeling, or this overwhelm.
Yeah, I mean, I think the value is in the nuance, right? Because
Mhm.
because we are complex creatures, and our relationships are complex, our engagements are complex, and I think that kind of speaks to this idea of how do we keep humanness in our endeavors and in our interactions. I wanted to read something, because I find it so relevant. I was rereading it this morning as we right now are in a fulfillment process of a new program called Nervous System Integration Facilitators Training. So this is our first training where we're actually teaching educators how to facilitate the nervous system work for greater behavior change. And it's fabulous. One of the resources we're leaning into is Brene Brown's Atlas of the Heart, because in order to meet our students or our customers or our clients or our people we're in relationship with, to meet them where they are and for them to be able to meet us, we have to establish a shared language. And so the language of the nervous system, um, and how it gets expressed in the body, but also from an emotional perspective, is a big thread for us. So this is from Brene Brown's book, Atlas of the Heart. It's, I think, in either the introduction or chapter 1. And she says, she's quoting a philosopher, Ludwig, uh, I don't know what it is, what the last name is, Wittgen Stein, Wittgenstein. That's probably how you say it. Um, It says the limits of my language mean the limits of my world. I thought that was so powerful. What does it mean if the vastness of human emotion and experience can only be expressed as mad, sad, or happy? Right. So
Yeah.
that's this deep lack of nuance. And then she goes on to write this. I love this so much because I'm going to draw it back to the nervous system. Just wait for it. Language is our portal to meaning making, connection, healing, learning, and self-awareness. And for me, I would put self-awareness first because that's what impacts our meaning making, our connection, our healing, and our learning. The word connection stands out to me because what we know about the polyvagal theory, which is one of our foundational theories that we use in teaching nervous system facilitation work, is that it's the science of connection. And so we have to have language. We have to have shared language. It's not enough for me to have the language, but Anne and I need to have it together. And we need to say, this is how I would express it. Does that mean the same thing to you? Right? That's how we are going to maintain the humanness of our interactions, is by together unearthing and discovering what our shared language is so that we can understand each other and we can create together and we can be in relationship to each other, whether we're, in a intimate partnership or we're in a creative partnership or in a business partnership. So I really think it's just not enough. It's like when we talk about bringing embodiment to anything, one of the major roadblocks for folks is, how do I even express that? What is that? What is the language of embodiment? And so if we're going to bring it to these areas of, advancement, it's part of the work is to be in the experience, and part of the work is learning how to express the experience so that we can communicate better and create cohesiveness.
Yeah, I mean, I think the opportunity here is the feeling that how much more, how it will be more important to be able to have, whether you call it, I think you called it embodied experience, embodied intelligence,
Mm-hmm.
or AK, or the other concept is emotional intelligence, so
Mm-hmm.
that you are able to navigate uh, the world of AI, and then to be able to navigate, what if you're interacting with AI all day and then you have to turn around and interact with your family? That's going to be a little bit of a switch, right?
Yeah.
um and how
Well,
can
and that's when your nervous system freaks the fuck out and you don't know why,
Mhm.
right? Those subtle shifts. It's like if you're dealing, even if you're on the computer all day,
Mhm.
whether you're conscious of AI interaction or having it or not, and then you turn around and engage with your family. I think we've all had that experience. There's resistance. That transition is not always easy, and we don't recognize it as a nervous system response, which then is dictating the way that we respond, the way that we say a thing, if we have patience, or if we're grumpy, or if we whatever it might be. But I really do think that's is a huge consideration. I was just thinking too, like even transitioning from work to home, right?
Absolutely.
and
Yeah.
and yeah, and the energy that takes up, you wouldn't think that it would, but it does. And I think for many of you can relate to those transition moments. I feel like I hijacked your thought just a little bit, Anne.
No, we're good. We're totally
Yeah.
good. Yeah.
Oh, you said something though, that made me think of, like, it's not just um like it's, so if we talk about it in broader terms of like technology, the intersection of technology and um embodiment, I'm also aware of because this is an avenue of work that we're starting to go down, is working with businesses to create cohesiveness within their teams using behavior change and the nervous system work. And when we are working in isolation, when we're working in front of computers, when big businesses now are spread out over the globe much more easily and readily, and we don't have a place of work and community to come to, there is a sense of disconnect, and disconnection is a lack of safety, right? When we are in connection, it's because we feel safe, and safety creates connection. So this is also another area of intersection that I'm very curious about. There's a book that I haven't actually started to read yet, but my friend Corey gave me, called Back to Human. And it's by Dan Schawbel, Schawbel, How Great Leaders Create Connection in the Age of Isolation. And I can't wait to dig into it, because I do think it's really relevant, and certainly made me think about the conversation you and I had in January about our work in the next 10 years and how it's going to make an impact. Period. End of sentence.
Well, we look forward to hearing from you all, and where you think your career might be in 10 years with AI and embodiment,
Yeah.
and the connection and the intersection between the two. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, this was a great conversation, and we might end up, if we have the follow through, to do that little bit of experimenting, right, with AI prompts. So stay tuned. And if you've had some experience with that, we'd love to know about it. You can share with us. And if you are a technological developer of AI and prompts, and you want to have a voice, you could have a voice here. So reach out to us, and we'd love to have you on. Okay. Thanks so much, Anne.
Thanks.
Bye, everybody.
Well, as always, we'd like to say a big thank you for your time and attention. We know how precious it is. We love hanging out with you and serving this amazing community of inspired leaders and educators who desire to make a bigger impact and bring their whole selves to this awesome party. We hope you are leaving feeling a little inspired, refreshed, maybe even excited, and a little bit giddy. The absolute sweetest and most powerful thing you can do to support this not-for-profit, minimally sponsored podcast is to tell us how much you love us. And there are a couple of ways you can do that. You can leave us your comments and reviews on iTunes or YouTube. Both are better. And if you didn't know we have a YouTube channel, now you do. Or by sending us the occasional love letter to embodiedbusinesspodcast@gmail.com. Until next time, we hope you'll keep asking, how do I want my business and my life to feel?